Before we begin, I want to point out that I am not a psychologist, psychiatrist, or a licensed therapist. I want to bring awareness to a widely growing concern that is seemingly being pushed aside. This video will likely not be shown to many people, so please share it with as many people as you can. This video also contains sensitive content such as and addiction. Viewer discretion is advised. Now, I have 4 short stories to tell you. The first is of a man named James. James was an ordinary man who worked at a major advertising company, which he was very proud of, especially given his rough life as a child. But one day, his wife contracted an illness which eventually took her life. His productivity did not waver, however, but something about him changed. His co-workers were the first to notice, for he was once a bright individual who was well-liked and respected around the office. But now, he was distant and cold. Distraught by grief and trauma over his sudden loss, he felt like he was a kid again when his father passed and his mother became violent. He felt alone and exposed. He first sought out as a way to calm himself. It worked, but not for long. He needed something stronger, so he turned to that did the trick. When he would do injections, he would sometimes forget about his childhood trauma and the passing of his wife, but that came at a price. The co-workers who once supported him now turned away. He lost his job, friends, family, home, and everything he owned. And every time the high wore off, the memories came flooding back. He blew his remaining large sum of money on not just but also and other controlled substances. During moments of sobriety, he knew that what he was doing wasn't right, and he wanted to seek help. But just before he contacted a support group, he passed away from an overdose on the streets of Augusta, Maine. Now here's the story of a woman named Hannah. Hannah was a loving mother, always looking after her daughter when her husband was at work. She's distant from her biological family after her uncle took advantage of her when she was younger, and her family chose to ignore her accusations, claiming that her uncle was a good man. One day, while she, her husband, and her daughter were at the mall, her daughter wandered off while her parents were distracted, never to be seen again. Hannah and her husband pulled every string they could to get their daughter back, but nothing came up. Hannah blames herself, for she let go of her daughter's hand to look at some merchandise at a stand. Her husband also blames himself for not keeping a closer eye. After 6 months, Hannah turns to alcohol to drown her sorrow, but she swiftly becomes dependent on it. Combined with the loss of their daughter and Hannah's dependence on alcohol, her husband divorces her, which only fuels her alcoholism. She vows to go to Alcoholics Anonymous, but never makes it to her first visit. Rather, she passes away in an apartment from alcohol poisoning. Here's the story of a man named Jerry. Jerry, growing up, was a bright young boy who excelled at school. His parents were most proud of him, of course, and if he kept at it, he would have graduated high school early. But one day, when he was about 12 years old, he saw an image of an endowed woman on the cover of a magazine in the grocery store his parents frequented. Staring at the image triggered something within him, something he hadn't felt before. When he got home that day, he went into his room, pulled out his smartphone, and looked for similar images online. As he viewed more and more of these images, he began to pleasure himself in a way he never heard of or understood. His grades start dropping, he isolated himself more and more from his friends and his loved ones. Groups online said that what he was doing was perfectly normal, but his parents disagreed when they caught him in the act. But he didn't feel ashamed or anything of the sort when he was caught. It only pushed him to pursue it more, up until his senior year of high school when he tried to turn it around. But the urges and the temptations were too strong for him to stop immediately. He managed to improve his grades and eventually graduated high school and was in university, but the temptations never left, and he often fell back on the habit. This would continue long after marriage and the birth of his 2 kids. One day, the urges were so strong that in a moment of pure blindness, he went to a restaurant that featured scantily dressed waitresses. He undoes his pants and begins to pleasure himself while looking at the waitresses. One of them catches him in the act, and before she could call the police, he rushed out, pulling his pants up. In a moment of clarity and guilt, he drives to a grocery store parking lot, writes a note which he sticks in his pocket, and takes his own life using the firearm he kept in the glove box of his car. The last sentences he wrote were, "I'm sorry for the harm that I caused. There is a demon that has full control of me, and he pushed me to do such a horrible act. I'm not a monster, just a lost soul." And for our final story, it is about a woman named Cheryl. Cheryl has a somewhat similar story to Jerry. She was a good student up until she got a smartphone and made an account on social media. Cheryl would spend hours upon hours scrolling through her phone and making content on her various accounts across multiple platforms. She of course slowed it down when she graduated high school, but it only got amplified during the COVID-19 pandemic. Eventually, she found herself stuck in a loop while working a minimum wage job. She had goals and dreams, of course, but never did anything to pursue them because she either spent time at work or scrolling through her phone. Eventually, her scrolling habit bled into her productivity at work, which caused her to lose her job. Yet nobody told her that this habit was harmful to her. So she starts blaming everything she sees until she finally lands upon her phone, realizing the true problem. She tries to look for another job, but the scrolling took up that precious time she needed for job searching. Eventually, she wanted to take her own life. In the midst of her planning, she told a former coworker about her scrolling problem, and her coworker offered her a solution. And that solution was putting a lock on her phone and only her coworker knowing the code. Cheryl thinks it's a bit childish, but she agrees. It takes a minute to adjust to the changes, but slowly, she starts looking for new jobs again. In approximately 10 or so years from that point, she becomes the owner of an online clothing chain, which has made her a millionaire. Her former coworker, now her business partner, offered to give her the code to the lock on her phone, but she declined, stating that she doesn't want to be tempted by the short satisfaction and time consumption of scrolling. But little did she know, it also solved another problem that she once perceived as normal, and that is self-pleasure, a habit she built when she was on social media unwillingly. Now I have a question for all of you. What do all 4 of these stories have in common? If you said that they all struggle with addiction, you would be correct. But there is one key difference between the first 2 and the second 2. In the first 2, they were well aware of their available treatment options for their addictions up until their tragic end. But the second 2 never heard of such options and felt as if their addictions were untreatable, which is not the case because there exists organizations such as Addicts Anonymous. Their addictions were strong enough that it led them down the path of self-destruction, with one of them being pushed far enough to commit a crime. But the last one sought out a treatment option she never even considered and thought that it was unnecessary. But that ended up being her saving grace. While all of these stories are fictional, they are very real and possible scenarios, with one of them being inspired off a true story. And that story belongs to a man named Nautica Malone. For those who already know, I'll keep it short. In January 2025, he drove over to a Bikini Beans coffee establishment in Tempe, Arizona. He pulled up to the drive-thru, pleasuring himself, and he was caught on camera by a barista. He drove off and would later take his own life in a shopping center parking lot in Goodyear, Arizona. He left behind a wife and child. This all sounds like a serious problem, right? It destroys the very livelihoods of people. So why is it not being addressed? Why aren't governments doing something about this issue? That is because we are in the middle of a cloaked epidemic under the guise of normalcy. Companies will say that they don't promote explicit material, yet anyone with a device that can connect to their platforms or services, or even the internet, can find it easily and will see it more often if they try to stay away from it. This is the silenced plague.
My understanding from Dr. Cusimano, your family physician, is that you collapse.
What causes a person to be addicted to? First, we gotta understand addiction in a general format for all types. There is a hormone in the brain called dopamine. Dopamine not only plays a key role in important bodily functions, such as movement, but it is also the reward hormone. To put it simply, you get a rush of it when you, let's say, get a passing grade on a test or win a competition. But other things, such as gambling, shopping, drinking, the consumption of controlled substances, and even the mere act of scrolling through social media, creates these short bursts of dopamine and leaves you craving more. Does the same thing, except it utilizes one's primal urges to reproduce. It satisfies the urge, but at the cost of addiction. You don't need to become addicted to the release. The mere act of will also satisfy this urge, making it a double-edged sword. To quote licensed psychotherapist Aimee Semas-Day,
when you don't have to work for it, it's kind of like cheap dopamine is what they call it. It doesn't last as long, and it's like a high and then a low, and then that high and then the low almost makes it so you want to come back for more. Maybe because on some level it's not fulfilling. It's kind of like eating a bag of chips versus eating like a well-balanced meal, right? The well-balanced meal is really sustaining with your energy level, and you're going to stay satisfied longer. If you eat like a bag of chips, it's kind of like empty calories. It satisfies you in the moment, but very quickly you're going to have cravings again, right? Because you get a drop in blood sugar, and it doesn't have any nutrients that's sustaining. It's kind of the same thing. So then you get hooked on it because you keep going back for more dopamine over and over again. Same thing with alcohol, same thing probably with shopping, same thing with gambling. It's all the same thing, right? So it's really interesting when you look at it physiologically what's happening.
It isn't just the simple act of exposure that gets a person addicted. Factors that can make a person more likely to become addicted to a substance or activity can be traced all the way back to conception. If the mother experiences stress or is addicted herself during her pregnancy, those things go right into her fetus. And childhood trauma is also a contributing factor. Dr. Gabor Maté mentions often in his book, In the Realm of Hungry Ghosts, Close Encounters with Addiction, that his clients often had parents who abused, neglected them, and even were addicts themselves. But as I've learned, sometimes this isn't always the case. Taking a look at Google Trends, we can see a statistical relationship between and popular social media platforms such as Instagram, Twitter/X, and TikTok, with the rising connections starting as early as 2009. Nowadays, with how social media algorithms work, if you try to avoid explicit content by blocking every page you see, the algorithm will think that you want to see more of it, something that I have personally experienced. Before Instagram introduced the reset feed option, my feed was filled with posts of explicit material that flew under the terms of service radar. I would, of course, block these accounts, but it created a Hydra effect where if I blocked one, 3 more would show up until I couldn't even see content from accounts that I followed. Even after the reset feed option was introduced, I could barely escape it. I know people are going to say that I trained the algorithm to show me that kind of content, but in reality, it kept coming to me no matter how much I tried to avoid it. And what I believe to be a contributing factor to this is that accounts that I follow interact with these kinds of posts. I remember one time I did a reset on my feed and was immediately shown foot fun content. And it's not just me either who's experiencing this. One of my online friends reported a similar thing happening to them. In 2021, the streaming platform Twitch had a bunch of models wearing bikinis in hot tubs where the models would do vaguely explicit actions for money, such as changing bikinis or doing a specific dance. Other streamers and users complained about the issue, but Twitch's response was to make a category for hot tub streams, which rightfully outraged users. But Twitch has been somewhat known for its vague and sometimes unfair enforcement of its terms of service. But now it seems like other platforms are doing a similar thing. Remember when I said in the beginning that anyone with a device that can connect to the internet can access explicit material? I truly meant it when I said anyone can access it, including young children. With kids as young as 4 to 5 years old nowadays, they have their own smartphones or tablets with nearly unrestricted access to the internet and social media, meaning they can access explicit content. Now, some sites do have restrictions, like putting in your date of birth and or a simple warning. But if a child is desperate enough, they will lie about their age to access this content. Even finding ways to bypass the more recent age verification using video game characters for face scans or using their parents' IDs to access certain material. Of course, a parent can put restrictions on their device, but that might not be enough if a parent isn't tech savvy. There might be ways to bypass the restrictions, or a child could guess the code. The best and easiest way to prevent a child from being exposed to explicit material nowadays is to simply not give them access to a handheld device and or block online games. But the ultimate cause of this is the more the internet is available, the easier it is to access this kind of material, especially with the anonymity that the internet can provide. A child might hear of explicit material from an older kid at school, or might be exposed to it online, whether it be on the app or game that they enjoy, or even a user sending it to them through private messaging. The most notorious example of children being exposed to explicit material is the popular gaming platform Roblox. There have been cases of people trying to bring this issue to light to the respective companies, such as popular predator hunting YouTubers Oma and Schlep. But they have been met with retaliation for their efforts, with the most famous example, with Schlep being issued a cease and desist letter from Roblox. Speaking of, Roblox has had an issue with explicit content being on their platform for years, and predators use it to not only expose children to explicit content, but to also take advantage of them by moving the conversation to the social platform Discord. And this issue is not just exclusive to Roblox, for it is present on platforms such as Instagram, Twitter/X, and so on. Predators expose children to this kind of content in the hopes of getting them addicted early. This is called EPI, or early introduction. When a child is exposed to explicit material, they will develop an addiction that may last for life if not treated immediately. And as with all addictions, the affected will crave stronger and stronger material to achieve the same high that they have felt when they were first exposed. This may result in the child growing up to become a predator themselves or committing misconduct such as in public, or even going as far as if they are strong enough to not commit misconduct, then the affected will experience symptoms such as erectile dysfunction in males, anxiety, and stress. And the affected might have a more explicit view on life and society as a whole. The point of media can be traced back as early as the 20th century, but it didn't become so prominent until the last couple of decades. If you watched TV or listened to certain pop stars from around 2012 to 2016, you might remember a lot of content being made centered around acts. An example of this being the infamous bikini girl ads from Carl's Jr. / Hardee's. Those ads were seen everywhere, including TV channels meant for children. With that, and what I've previously stated about ease of access, it seems that, at least in the United States, we have developed into a more charged society, but it has resulted in an increase of cases. From 2010 to 2015, the percentages of reported cases jumped from 18.3% to 21.3% for women alone. The lowest number of reported cases was in 2011 with 84,175. But just 2 years later, it jumped to 118,289. Right now, the current peak is in 2018 with a disturbing 145,647. Understandably, with these numbers in mind, nearly all women around the United States feel unsafe if they step out of the house and often receive explicit messages from people online. I have interviewed 2 of my female friends, who will remain anonymous, to help us get a better understanding. How often do you receive explicit messages from either random users or people you know, bi-weekly or weekly, regardless of follower count? Pretty much, it ranges from weekly to monthly, but it always happens. I even took a close friend of mine to court over harassment. Have you been exposed to explicit material online when you were younger? If so, where and how? Yes, via Facebook, Instagram, and Kik in about 2012 to 2013 when I was 10 and 11. Yes, it was because of an inside joke with my dad and his buddy. He bought us both shirts from Las Vegas and mistakenly gifted me the one meant for his friend. I have never heard of the word before. He was shocked upon seeing the mistake and snatched it away and told me it's a forbidden word. In a fit, I went to Google and looked it up. That's when I was first exposed. From that point forward, I got curious. Got into chat rooms where I acted out situations pretending I was older. There was another time where my stepsister's online friend attempted to coerce me into exposing myself for him. We didn't know who he was or his age. Do you feel like you're gonna get attacked by a rapist if you travel alone, regardless of location and time? It's highly dependent upon location and at night. Most of the time, I make it a goal to wear clothes that are too difficult to cut for easy access, and always watch my back. Do you carry any weapons? I used to carry pepper spray. Occasionally, when I feel threatened at work, I will grab a metal pipe and keep it near me, but I don't feel threatened as much as I feel threatened with violence. I personally think it's necessary to know exactly how to use weapons before equipping them, but I do try to carry pepper spray. I think these comments more than prove how severe this problem has gotten, and at this rate, I fear it's only going to get worse. Clearly, this is all a big issue. So why aren't governments banning the root cause, which is, from what I can gather, there has been next to no action taken from the US government, with the closest thing being the age verification system that I brought up earlier, which again doesn't work. As of recently, it was also proven to be a major security concern, with the age verification vendor Persona leaving their front end exposed to the public that was connected to a US government authorized server. This is not the only time that the US government has lied to the public. On January 30th, 2026, more than 3 million pages of the Epstein files were released to the public after immense backlash from previously released documents and apparent stalling of their release. The documents showed former and current presidents performing explicit acts on minors, consuming infants, performing rituals, and much, much more. In the files, Bill Gates mentioned a pandemic simulation, and Epstein has expressed interest in meeting with Mark Zuckerberg. So what if this is what they want? They don't want to ban so more are made. What about the conversations or deals that weren't recorded? What about the cases that were never reported? I don't have a good answer for that. But I do know that from what I've seen and experienced, this all seems deliberate. It is clear that our leaders have no interest in banning and saving lives. With this information that I have presented to you, I want to say right here, right now, in case anything happens to me, I am happy with my life, I know how to swim, I am healthy, I am mentally sound, I do not plan on disappearing anytime soon. When I am on the road, I am safe and aware. I am a safe and aware worker, and I keep hazardous materials far away from my food. If I wind up dead, I was murdered by these people.